This is Mike McCoo calling to order the meeting of the Willington School Building Committee Land Assessment Subcommittee on March 14th, 2022 at 3:39 p.m. And let me get my agenda here. Review of 2/28/2022 minutes. I guess since we learned at our last regular meeting of the school building committee that the minutes have to be approved in full committee. So I just named it review. So if anyone who is in attendance on the 28th has any comments or corrections, I'll take them, and then we'll let the full committee vote on the minutes on Wednesday. All right. Seeing none, I guess we'll move on. Okay. So land assessment discussion, including Mr. Pellman of Colliers, and I see we have another guest along too. So Scott, if you want to introduce and then go ahead and jump right in.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, attending as well this afternoon is Adam from our office. Adam was instrumental in, he's been assisting me in some of the site reviews. So I know he's got a conflict in a little while, but he's going to try and stay with us as long as possible. But just wanted to make sure Adam was part of the discussions. So Mike, what I'd like to do is kind of recap where we were at the last meeting. And if possible, if I could just share my screen.
Yep, let me make sure we have that set up.
Okay.
I think you should have the correct signal.
Yep, there we go. Okay. All right. So can everybody see see my screen?
I can.
Okay. So this was the matrix of the initial town-owned parcels that we identified that potentially were large enough to support a new school. Parcel A, we started with the existing 111 River Road. After the last meeting, and based on input from this committee, we were notified and confirmed that both Parcel B and Parcel C were on conservation land. Parcel D, 111 Boston Turnpike, brownfields, also has some significant topography, as well as went back, took another look at Parcel E. It's actually 8 to 10% in the middle of the slope, but actually the first 160, 180 feet, it goes up 30 feet. It's actually about a 17% slope. So significant slope there, as well as the Youngerman property, along with wetlands, unsuitable soils, and significant slope. So these were, again, the town-owned parcels that we reviewed last week. So last meeting. What I've done since in working with Phil is I've taken a deeper dive on Parcel A. At this point, we don't have a full A2T2 survey, anything really in exact scale that I can use, but I was able to interpolate off the town GIS sites. And so I've created the following concept, for the existing Hall Memorial School site. And so again, just to orient yourself, this is Route 32. The existing fields are here. Actually, there's a small building, I think a little storage building. Oops, sorry. Right on the property lines. This existing parcel actually goes down quite a bit. Again, don't really have the grading. There is also a stream in this location. So what I was able to do is I looked at bringing the overall grade of this field down a few feet, and then continued the grading down to with 100 feet of the stream, which we understand is typically the normal wetland setback. So I offset 100 feet from the stream, did some calculations on topo, then was able to kind of set this line off the GIS map, brought it into this map, put them to scale, because this is an older drawing when the addition was created, to get the site plan into scale. So the thought here, from a circulation standpoint, to start out, is to create a new curb cut off 32 specifically for bus access, separating the bus to the parent drop-off, which we think is critical to help improve traffic flow. So we'd have bus lane here, right up adjacent to the school, dedicated bus lane, then a plaza area here separating what is the current parent drop-off. So that would function very similar to as it functions now. You've got a much wider lane here for the parents to pull over to this curb line. The way we typically organize these is we put a nice ornamental fence or gate. So there's specific control points in this again, concept plan. Again, this is just a concept to test the site. What you do is you'd have openings within those gates in specific points to come across and enter into the existing building that could be controlled to make sure you maintain the safety of the students. We've proposed putting additional overflow parking or parking onto what is right now currently the paved play area, picking up an additional 36 spots there. So with the revisions, I believe we're at 93 spaces. What Phil was looking to get was actually 100 plus 12 visitors, so 112. Right now, this represents 93. So we're close, not quite there. As you can see, things are fairly tight. We took a look at the elementary school's paved play area and determined that it was a little bit smaller than the paved play area out here. So we've sized that accordingly. And then looked at the need for, and Phil provided information on the size of the baseball field and softball fields for the middle school age group, what they would be looking to have incorporated. And we're just able to fit a baseball and softball, getting the infields off of a soccer field and having an overlap. What you see in the lighter blue is the outline of the existing building. And what you see here in dark blue is just what would be a proposed addition. The proposed addition is approximately, I believe it's 17,000 square feet. This is the classrooms, spaces that we need, pre-K, first grade, all the other program spaces that we just cannot fit into the existing building. So the current ed spec that we understand, Phil is continuing to work on with his administrators and with the Board of Ed, that program, as we understand it today, again, it has not been finalized, would be able to fit here. We're looking at then trying to somehow squeeze in some playground areas between the bus access road and the schools 2 through 5, pre-K through 1. This access road could be gated to secure it, to make sure that there isn't any unwanted traffic that comes down that during the school day. Those gates then open to facilitate bus traffic in the morning and evening pickup. The nice thing with this layout is it would allow buses to stack all along this road for student dismissal and arrival. So I think it would certainly be an improvement. So this is kind of our test fit. If in fact, as we continue to look at other available parcels, if we really wanted to take this to the next level, and I'm not advocating it at this point, but potentially sometime in the future, I think we'd really need to get a survey with accurate grades of the existing condition that we could be modified exactly where that stream is. Again, we're interpolating off of GIS maps, bringing them into a PDF, putting those to scale, and then joining them together. So I do feel this is reasonably accurate, but certainly, again, if we were going to really move forward seriously with a concept on the existing site, we'd probably have to look at exploring getting some survey work done to help take a look and confirm this. So with that, let me stop right there, and I'll open things up for any questions, because I know this is the first time you're seeing this.
I think it's a great, sort of a next step from the conversations that we had in the last 2 meetings, with in the regular meetings also, where Ralph shared his ideas and I shared my ideas. I think it's great to test this concept, and I think it probably gives us enough to at least say it's possible.
Correct.
You know,
Yeah, it
this
is absolutely, it's
conceptual
possible.
stage, right? You know, every project I've worked on starts with basically a bunch of blocks, you know, square footages or whatever. And you basically just start with putting blocks on either on the footprint of a building or on a whole piece of property. And I think this is a great starting point to at least say it is possible without judging if it's desirable.
And I had a couple comments here, Scott. Your bus lane. Did you coordinate that with the plans for South Wellington, Route 32 sidewalk, et cetera, improvements? Because there is a sketch of that proposed revised parking lot across the street.
Understood. No, I have not taken it that far. Again, this was just really a concept, Ralph, to see if it could,
Okay,
was possible and it would fit. So no, didn't want to spend a ton of time developing it. Certainly if we, you know, if we want to take this to the next level, those would be some of the steps that we would undertake.
okay. The other catch I think you've got is the south parcel that needs to be raised. Unfortunately, that existing soccer field, I believe, is actually lower than the stream itself
Yes, it is.
that runs along that southern boundary. So bringing that elevation up certainly is going to help matters. Judging from what was approved for the Love's travel stop, retaining walls are certainly not out of the question to minimize the offset from any watercourse or wetland. I think that the town was a tad too liberal on that project, but that's my own personal opinion. I look at things like Buckland Hills Mall and some of the watercourses that were preserved in an alley between two retaining walls, which is a little extreme in my opinion, but nonetheless, it was something that did fly.
Yeah, it certainly, you know, again, one of the next steps would be taking this and going down to the town engineering departments, planning, wetlands, and just having some very high level discussions on what would be possible. Again, at this point, what I took was a little more conservative approach, offset from, again, the wetland line from the stream 100 feet and then graded up from there. So, you know, certainly if there were opportunities to look at a solution that would offer maybe a little bit more areas, you can tell, you know, coming down the line in baseball, be very tight to where that area would start to drop off fairly quickly, as well as the position of the softball field parallel, you know, third base line parallel to Route 32. We might need to put some netting or screening or something there to stop the right-handed hitters from pulling the ball onto Route 32.
Sure. I mean, I like the concept, don't get me wrong. I'm just a typical engineer. I'm looking for the pitfalls, the gotchas.
Yeah, and again, just ask that you look at it with an eye of this is, I'm not presenting this as a fully resolved solution, but just really the next level of doing a test fit to see if, you know, we could make something work.
Are we looking at a 2-story addition or more?
A 1-story addition.
Why not 2?
Because the upper levels, there are enough spaces within the existing school to house other programmatic spaces that can live on the upper levels.
Okay, we don't get the auditorium back in the original building then.
No, the auditorium, which is current,
Currently
which is
the
the current
library.
media center, yeah, would probably best guesstimate maybe at best seat 200 people at best. I mean, it's not a very large area for an auditorium, but no, that area would be occupied by program space.
Okay, because the original school was built both as a 4-classroom school and a community center. That was its original conception back in 1922. Just for a little historic background.
Scott, do you have any other, have you done any work going into property other than town-owned?
Yes,
Yeah.
we have looked at a number of properties.
All right, so
Again, I think
let me
if-
just interrupt you. I'm sorry. I just wanted to kind of figure out our time allotment here. So it would kind of help us decide how much time to spend talking about this versus if we need to go into executive session.
Yeah, I think if there aren't any more specific questions on this, I would recommend going into executive session.
I have some
and then we
questions.
can-
Yeah, I see your yellow hand, Gary. Sorry.
Thank you. So I'll be quick. I think I would like to go into executive session as well if we can. I just, to me, this seems like, I guess the message of Mike, the way Mike put it before, it's possible, this is possible. It's definitely tight. And we'll have to we have to consider making some trade-offs, I think. But certainly I think having this kind of, outline is helpful and just kind of showing, how this could work. And to your point, you and Ralph did something similar previously. So I'm glad to see that kind of jives with this. I did want to ask Scott, does this assume that the parking lot across 32 remains parking?
I can only say that the desire was 112 parking spaces. This only has
Yep.
93 currently.
Right. Mhm.
Is there a way we may be able to find some more? Possibly. So that's, again, still waiting for the final ed spec to be developed,
Mhm.
and submitted by the board. But that was my target provided by Phil.
Yeah, no, I
So-
hear that. That's why I asked the question, whether or not this, because we're short on, quote unquote, short on parking, which to me is not necessarily a priority to get a lot more parking spaces. But, if there was an opportunity with those existing spaces, that's basically the question.
I do know the desire was to get as much, if not all, of the parking, so people visiting the school would not be required to cross Route 32.
Mhm. Okay.
I'm a big advocate of that also. I think if you look at the daily use though, because I live almost next door to the school, for the most part, everyone's parking across the street and they're not using the back lot because of parent pickup and buses right now. So they are fitting most of their daily use into about 50 parking spaces. So 93 might be reasonable.
Yep. Just the other thing I'd point out is just something to think about is just take a look at how much space the baseball and softball fields take up. Baseball and softball are becoming less and less popular. And I'm saying this as a dad of somebody that plays baseball. But so something to think about is like, is it necessary for those two fields to take up most of the space in the spring anyways, I guess. Just something for us to think about. I'm not even sure there will be baseball and softball teams at Hall this spring. There may be, but there may not. So just something to think about, but I appreciate the effort. And I think it's definitely worthy of consideration. Thank you.
Scott, the 112 spaces that Phil's looking for seems to fly in the face of what's in the state guidelines for recommended number of spaces.
Well, he did staff count as well as support, kitchen staff, janitorial staff, and then looked at adding 12 spaces. Paras, office staff. He based his number on a physical staff count for a combined school. But that question would be better posed to Phil, certainly.
Because the numbers I was coming up with when I look at those guidelines is somewhere around 50 to 60 spaces for a middle school.
That would not cover the staff required to run the school.
How
Yeah.
is DAS going to view that?
I'm not sure which document you're referencing, Ralph.
Connecticut School Construction Standards and Guidelines, September 22, 2016.
Is that the Excel spreadsheet?
No, sir. That's a PDF file.
Well, not to throw the state under the bridge, but and they fixed some of it. You know, they had a recommended stage size for a high school for a long period of time at 600 square feet, which is not even a full classroom. Now you try and put, a lot of high school or choral instrumental programs onto a stage, they're not going to fit. So you got to be careful on what you look at. The state is not going to argue required spaces, specifically when, Phil's basing it on actual staffing to run the school. That would not be a problem. Typically we're going to have to take a look at if there's also local zoning requirements. Usually they don't really address schools. You have to try and equate it to some other retail functions when having discussions with planning departments as far as parking for schools.
Well, the good news, this level of detail and granularity, we don't have to resolve yet. It's a good exercise, but it's not critical yet.
Agreed.
Any other questions on this concept or any of the other town parcels before we move to the next agenda item?
Real quick, I just thought of one other thing. Scott, on the 1-story addition, is there opportunity for anything on top of that structure? Outdoor use or anything like that, or would that assume that that's just, a roof essentially?
Again, those are criteria that, you could look at putting in a green roof. There could be areas of expansion as far as the second floor for some of the higher grades. But again, that would have to be sort of included, in the ed spec if you wanted to have a green roof, for example. Or, maybe you wanted to look at a geothermal field and look at a different heating. Those would be things that you'd want to, build into the ed spec as far as the requirements of this is what we'd like to encompass within the project.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I would agree that at this point, we don't have to be married to a single story or multi-story just yet. We have to see the ed spec. We have to start narrowing down what the programmatic use of the spaces will be and how they all plug into the box. And then we can get really specific about those exiting requirements for the upper floors and all that, and make a final decision on single story or multi-story or whatever.
Yeah, and again, I don't think
this is that it shows you the square footage of ground you would need in the worst case scenario, which is all on one floor.
Right, that's not a decision you're going to have to make. Ultimately, it would be once you hire an architect and give them their final design, the building committee then would want to describe those parameters to the architect. So again,
right,
this is a solution, a concept, is not meant to be a final solution whatsoever. Again, just a test fit, to see if in fact it would fit. And the answer to that is yes, with the caveat that, except unless you went above this with a second story, adding on anything further outside of the darker blue would be very problematic.
Right. Yeah, you're about maximum use of space, of land space here. Pretty much.
Yeah, because we're already a little undersized, and again, on the property, we've got the wetlands here, we've got the the drop off to the stream here. And then again, topography on the entry road coming down is also, quite steep.
Yep.
This area would be reserved for service, a loading dock and all. So that's what would take place in this area.
A quick look at the zoning regs. It could be construed to require one space for every 200 square feet of gross floor area.
Yeah, and that's where sometimes we have those discussions with zoning, because there's nothing typically within the regulations of a municipality that addresses schools per se.
Well, this is educational facilities, so that is a category that they do address.
Well, it's 60,000 divided by 200 would be 300 spaces.
Okay.
So that would eliminate.
Right, I think we agree we don't need
all your ball
300.
fields. And that's where we, you'd have to take it to the next level and have those discussions and go through, zoning approvals.
All right, anything else on this land assessment discussion? Okay, I would like to make a motion that we go into executive session inviting Mr. Levitas and Mr. Pellman. Per Connecticut General Statutes 1-200 subsection 6 and subsection D. Can I get a second?
Second.
All right, I guess Gary, Ralph, and I are the voting members here, so raise your hand if you vote in the affirmative to go into executive session. All right, that's a unanimous vote to go into executive session. Let me just note the time. Okay, since there's no one else in the meeting, I don't have to kick anybody out.
Have you stopped recording?
I'm just, yeah, I'm expanding my screen so I can get to the record button here, and I feel like there's a way I can lock the meeting.
Should be.
Opening up all the little, all right, lock meeting. Okay. Okay, we are returning from executive session at 4:21 PM, and I'm unlocking the meeting now in case there's anyone in the public who wants to join. Okay, we're back in regular session. Hang on, let me get my agenda. Next item on the agenda is recommendations to the full committee if required. I believe that we would like to recommend to the full committee that that we should be doing the outreach soon to anyone in town who would like to have property considered, even possibly as a donation. I think we can just, we don't really need a motion. That could just be consensus to recommend that back to the regular. Okay.
Yeah, I would just communicate that under our report.
Yeah. Okay, I'm just gonna make the note so I remember to do it. Okay. All right. Anything else for recommendations to the full committee? No? Okay. I don't believe we have anyone from the outside, but all out present to speak anyway. All right, seeing none, let's set our next meeting. Okay, recommendations on the next meeting?
I think, Mike, give us another 2 weeks to try and dive a little bit more into, some of these other land opportunities. And then I think, at the next meeting, go over what, we've identified as some potential sites. And then probably after that, set something up informally with town staff to kind of review some of the parameters of those sites, get a little bit more input, a little bit more information.
Okay. So we'd be talking about the 28th possibly if we did 2 weeks from today.
Mhm.
Ralph and Gary.
If we go a week later, Mike, that way we'll have 2 full committee meetings under our belt.
So
That would actually be helpful to me too. I'm not available on the 28th, but what's it, the 4th, Ralph? 4th I would be.
April
let me see
4th.
here.
April 4th. Yeah.
Yeah,
Scott, does that work for you?
It does starting at 4 o'clock or later.
Okay. Does that work, Gary and Ralph? If we're efficient at our meetings?
You know me,
It's
Mike.
gonna, it's gonna be tight. It's gonna be tight for me, but let's see. Monday.
Selectmen's
could-
meeting.
Sorry, Ralph, go ahead.
There's a selectmen's meeting that night at 6:30, so we got to squeeze it between 4 and 6:30.
Yeah, I plan on being out well before 6:30.
Yeah, no, I think I can do it. If we start at 4, if that's all right with Scott, I could probably do 4 to 5.
Okay. Well, I think the good thing about us having a little momentum now is we're biting this off in reasonable pieces. These are essentially updates every couple of weeks, so we don't have to go in really deep and long.
Mhm.
Adam, if you're going to be at the next meetings, that work for you?
Yep, it does.
Okay. All right. So 4 at 4 p.m.
4-4.
4. Okay. And then I believe the last item is probably, yes, it is indeed, adjournment.
Moved.
Adjourn. Can I get a second?
I'll second. It sounds like Ralph made a motion, so I'll second.
I did.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. So hang on, I'll get it noted properly here.
I won't argue over who made the motion, Mike.
All right. Thank you, Scott and Adam, and thank you, Ralph, Gary, for your participation. And all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thanks, everybody. We are adjourned at 4:26.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks all.